From the nation's capital, Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce. A weekly discussion about the federal issues most important to Nevada. And now, from Washington, D.C., here's Marilee Joyce.
Good day to you. I'm Marilee Joyce, and this is Eye on Washington, the only statewide Nevada news program produced in Washington, D.C. Every week, Eye on Washington takes you straight to Capitol Hill for a discussion with Nevada's delegation and other leaders about the federal matters that matter to you. Today's topic, he says he wants to manage Nevada's natural resources in an economically and environmentally responsible way. We'll tell you one Nevada U.S. Congressman's fight to strengthen local control over federal lands. And he is my guest today, of course, Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you, Marilee.
Thank you. From his seat on the Natural Resources Committee, he is advocating for local communities to make decisions on how best to use public lands to spur economic growth. And today on Eye on Washington, we'll find out how he is working to give Nevadans sovereignty in public lands designations. We'll tell you about his bill to accelerate the process of transferring small land parcels to local communities. And we'll tell you about his thoughts on how the state can benefit economically from our lands while also preserving the unique landscape. Well, if you go to the public land section of my guest's website, you'll see a single bold sentence leading off the page. It reads, "Nevadans must have a seat at the table." While an emphasis on the need for local and not federal control is a running theme in the congressman's legislative efforts, probably nowhere is that theme more evident than in his public lands work. Since coming to the Hill, my guest has called public land management a significant issue for Nevada, saying it's time for Nevada's local communities to be able to decide for themselves the best uses for public lands to spur economic growth. To that end, he's introduced legislation to affirm Nevada's authority in land designations and to ease the land's disposal process. That local emphasis, seen in much of the legislative work the congressman has introduced or fought for this year, stems from his belief that the community knows better than the federal government when it comes to the issues that impact us. And you know, regarding today's topic, here's what you say on your site. You say, quote, "Common sense federal solutions to our public lands designation are possible, but local communities must have a seat at the table to overcome the Washington knows best mentality that routinely ignores the best interests of local stakeholders."
You know, Marilee, unfortunately, when the economy is where it is now, it causes you to take a pretty specific look at how things are going. And this is one of the areas where, quite frankly, if you're going to do economic development, you have to have the landlord. And the landlord, in the case of Nevada, for 85% of the ground is the federal government.
You know, we're going to talk about some specific public lands legislation you've either authored or advocated, but I want to focus this segment on that theme that seems to run throughout your work here on the Hill, and it's whether we're talking lands, mining, education, environment, healthcare, let the local people decide what's best for them.
Yep, and no disrespect. I mean, I'm not on a war against the federal government, but when you talk about folks who are 2,500 miles away, most of whom did not have deep roots in your state or deep background in terms of economic, societal, cultural, all that other sort of stuff, obviously it gives you more strength in terms of what's going on when you've got those folks who are connected locally at the forefront.
Now, and you've said you believe it's possible to leverage our natural resources in an economically and environmentally responsible way. Tell us about your philosophy on this.
Well, Marilee, it's important to start out with...
a lot of people want to divide that.
And they absolutely do, which is interesting. Nobody's anti-environment. You know, nobody wants Lake Tahoe dirty. Nobody wants mountaintops, leveled off. Nobody wants dirty streams. Nobody wants species threatened or anything else like that. So, there are things, and there are many examples. The mining industry in Nevada has been very proactive in terms of restoration, species management, stream management, things like that. They're just one example of how it is possible to make multiple use work without degrading the environment and keeping those environmental values that we all like. So it's not as many people, I think, in this day and age think if you're either pro-environment or anti-environment, and in between the two can't meet. And
you've been sure to try to change that. I think for years people did separate those two things. And since you've come to the Hill, you've really tried to emphasize that you can be both economically and environmentally conscious and responsible, and that it really is connected, isn't it?
Well, when you look at the baseline for a lot of this, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA doesn't say that you must not do anything. And so, there are ways in there to make things work. There are areas where maybe you shouldn't do anything. But the vast majority of it, there are ways to make sure that we can basically meet the needs and desires not only of economic development and multiple use, but also of environment and nature.
Last winter you were here talking about your Western Caucus, and you shared with us a lot about your advocacy for recognition of water rights and multi-use access. How does that tie into your work to help Nevada leverage its vast public lands?
Well, one of the biggest levers we have in terms of, in a public lands management sense, is that water law is the province of the state, and the groundwaters of the state of Nevada belong to the state. So when you talk about forming a true and realistic partnership with the federal land managers in Nevada and in the regions that Nevada is part of and in the nation, that's a big part of it because, as you know, being in the Great Basin, the Intermountain West, water's a big deal.
Is one of the reasons you joined the Western Caucus to kind of have that kind of the backup caucus to the public lands committee?
The Western Caucus, with its emphasis, although there are members from throughout the nation, with its emphasis with your neighbors from Idaho, from Utah, from Arizona, there are Californians in the caucus, Colorado folks, all of those folks deal with, it's amazing how you sit there and you go, well, we've got this issue, and then you start talking to your colleagues. It's like, you know what, a lot of the issues are the same. The scale may be different, there may be a little wrinkle, but water's a huge deal. Federal ownership of land is a Western phenomenon. I think less than 1% of Massachusetts is federally owned, less than 2% of New Jersey. So when you say, hey, I'm from a state that's 85% owned, they have no concept.
Exactly. When we come back, did you know that if you want to just do a straightforward, non-controversial public land transfers, you can wait a decade? My guest is tired of that, and he's changing it right after this.
You're watching Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, brought to you by the National Mining Association, Caesars Entertainment, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, NV Energy, Western Lithium Corporation, the Frias Companies, the Nevada Mining Association, Skyline Restaurant and Casino, and the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look! I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're going to be hanging out a little bit more.
Welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of an effort on Capitol Hill to give Nevadans more say over public land designation decisions. We've been visiting with the leader of that effort, Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. In Western states, if you want to do just a straightforward, non-controversial public land sale, plan to wait more than 10 years. And it's a wait, my guest says, is far, far too long. The federal government controls more than 85% of Nevada's land, and each land sale decreases the vast federal inventory and promotes local control. Congressman Amodei says that while he believes there should be scrutiny over any sale, bureaucratic regulations make for a super slow legislative process that drags out the land transfers in excess of a decade. To help alleviate this problem, the congressman has introduced the Small Lands Tracts Conveyance Act. It seeks to accelerate the process for transferring small parcels of federal land to local communities, and it defines a small tract as 160 acres or less. It limits the transfer process for such lands to 18 months. Under the legislation, if parcels are purchased by private entities for fair market value, 50% of the revenues from the sale go to the county governments in which the land's located. The other 50% goes to the federal treasury. And if non-private entities like county governments purchase land, 100% of the revenues would go to the treasury. And Congressman, you told the press in April that this bill, quote, is a win-win, saying, quote, it would save the taxpayers, BLM, and the U.S. Forest Service the expense of managing an excessive portfolio of public lands. It would generate revenue for local and federal government, which could be used for deficit reduction. But then you added, and most importantly, it would give states like Nevada the freedom to determine how best to use our lands, whether for economic development, farming, ranching, or conservation. There's that theme again. Let Nevadans decide. And cutting it back from 10 years to 18 months is pretty impressive.
10 years is kind of a historical average, Marilee.
And why? Why is it so long?
Well, first of all, you have to go through a process, whether it goes through the resource management plan process or whether it goes through an act of Congress. And that's even for like 2 or 3 acres. So what we were trying to do was get to the point where you could say, listen, if you're around an urban area or a city, it's less than a quarter section or less, there are no environmental issues, then you know what, you ought to be able to have a process that's relatively quick so that the market and the economy in that local area can work, to bring one of the primary resources for economic development into availability.
But let's emphasize that no environmental issues.
Yeah.
I want to be sure to mention that your bill excludes lands with established federal protection for cultural, biological, and endangered species stuff. So
once again, there's an example of this is not an attempt to do a wink and a nod and get around legitimate environmental concerns, so that if those are on the ground, then it's like, okay, you know what, that doesn't apply. But to sit there and treat everything like it's the same when it's not, it just has no foundation in common sense.
Likely, well, I know a lot goes on in southern Nevada for public lands transfers too, but since you represent such a large area in northern Nevada, I would assume there's a lot more public lands issues in the north end of the state.
You know, the interesting thing, and this applies at both ends, even though in southern Nevada there were large 1,000+ acre tracts that were sold as part of that development process, which this would not apply to, but when you look all around, when you look around communities, Marilee, pick out the community, whether it's Carlin, whether it's Sparks, whether it's Dayton, whether it's Yerington. There are adjacent parcels that are owned by the federal government that they're just kind of, they're just there. And it's like, listen, if somebody wants to pay you for it, and there are no management issues there that you need to keep track of, why wouldn't you get it off the books and get it onto the tax rolls?
Let's mention another public lands bill that just passed the House from your good friend, Nevada U.S. Congressman Joe Heck. It regards the Mesquite Lands Act of 1986, and without getting into the whole bill, it extends a deadline for the purchase of lands because in the rough economy, Mesquite wasn't in a position to participate in the sale. So as the economy improves, Mesquite will improve economically as well.
Right. The times that they had provided in the original legislation, as a matter of fact, I think it might have already been extended once. So it wasn't changing any of the legislation other than to say the old deadline has now been changed to a new deadline, obviously as a result of what's happened with development and real estate values in the whole state of Nevada as well as elsewhere starting in 2008.
When Congressman Heck put out the good news release from his office about the bill, you were quoted in the release saying, "I congratulate my colleague from Southern Nevada and the people of Mesquite for exercising the right to determine their own economic future. Anytime Nevadans anywhere can shed the wet blanket of Washington-based control to improve our communities is a victory for the entire Silver State." We'll have to ask my audience if they see a theme here.
They might. It's just another example of this.
And again, you've said you're not trying to knock Washington, but you're saying that local people who are in the state where these things are happening know best how things should be.
These types of things gore nobody's ox. We ought to be doing it just as a matter of administrative routine.
As we wrap up this segment, what else are you doing this year on public lands related matters?
Well, we're working to try to make the federal government fully responsible as a partner in terms of the potential sage hen listing. Number one threat that it faces is wildland fire, not mining, not grazing, not recreation. It's wildland fire. Since you're the landowner, you're the landlord of 85%, you've got responsibilities. Respond to the major threat, not the minor threats. We're also working...
What's happening there now?
Well, right now we're talking about closing off large segments to things that are not the major threat. We're going to regulate mining, we're going to regulate grazing, we're going to regulate energy exploration, all those things, Marilee, which as a fact in Nevada are not the threat to sage hen habitat. It's wildland fire, species encroachment, fuels management. Those are all resource things that the landowner should be taking a lead on.
You're going to be introducing something soon on that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're working with the appropriations folks and the Interior Subcommittee, Representative Simpson's folks, and we're also looking at some NEPA legislation to speed up the ability to do those projects on the ground.
All right. When we come back, we're going to find out the jurisdiction of the Natural Resources Committee and why it's so important that Nevada has a player on that committee.
Every day, thousands of people in northern Nevada don't get enough to eat. 1 out of 5 children in northern Nevada go to bed hungry every night. But you can do something about it. Catholic Community Services of Northern Nevada has been providing help and creating hope in our community for more than 65 years. By donating food, time, or money, you can make a difference in a hungry person's life. When you make your generous donation to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, you're helping to fight the scourge of hunger in northern Nevada. In these tough economic times, now more than ever, we need to help those less fortunate. To find out how you can donate to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, call, click, or stop by, and together we can end hunger in northern Nevada.
Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
When it comes to state-of-the-art energy, Nevada is the right state to be in. A reliable, efficient network. Cleaner energy resources like solar, wind, and geothermal. And technology that will help you save energy and money at home. Learn more at nvenergy.com.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of public land management and why my guest says Nevadans should have a stronger role in controlling federal lands. He is my guest today. Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. So if you're a Nevadan who wants more local control over the state's huge public lands inventory, you might want to be thankful that my guest holds a seat on the committee that has jurisdiction over those lands. In fact, the House Natural Resources Committee has jurisdiction over a whole lot of areas Nevadans care a whole lot about. There are 20 areas of committee jurisdiction. I'll just mention some those in you and my audience might be most interested in. Today's topic, of course, public lands, mining interests, mineral resources of public lands, fisheries and wildlife, interstate compacts relating to apportionment of water for irrigation purposes, irrigation and reclamation, including water supply for reclamation projects, and easement of public lands for irrigation projects, and relations with Native Americans and Native American tribes. And if that's not Nevada-centric enough for you, the congressman serves on both the subcommittee on national parks, forests, and public lands, and the subcommittee on energy and mineral resources. You know, on that part of your website that lists your three committee assignments, natural resources, judiciary, and veterans affairs, you wrote, quote, "I sought and obtained House committee assignments with jurisdictions important to Nevada." I remember before you were even elected, you were rallying hard for these three committees. How come?
I'll tell you, the natural resources, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what you said because that pretty well covers it. When your state's 85% federal land, and you're talking about our mineral industry and public lands, the importance of all that administration, I mean, that's priority number one. And so those subcommittees, along with the committee in general, have been an absolute joy for me to have been able to have landed those. I do owe publicly another shout out, though, to Representative Fleischman from Tennessee, who voluntarily stepped off the committee to open a slot because there wasn't an opening. So thank you again to my colleague from Tennessee. And
you have some say over public lands, water, and mining.
Yep.
Last year, before you even was sworn in, as I said, you were lobbying hard for that assignment. I guess you really thought it was important for Nevada to have a rep on all three of those committees.
You know, I'll tell you what was neat is the leadership in the Republican conference in the House recognized it too, in terms of this guy represents the largest district in the nation that is not coterminous with the borders of a state. It is 85% owned by the federal government. Those are absolute common sense musts in terms of putting that person in that position on that committee in order to be able to serve the folks who he represents. You
know, again, focusing on the public lands theme of today, you say on the public lands page of your site, you said, as a member of the House Natural Resources Committee, I'm advancing land bills for a third of the counties in Nevada to strengthen local control over the federal lands. And you say a significant issue for Nevada, which dovetails with economic growth, is public land management. How do they dovetail together? Well,
because when you talk about planning and zoning, that's the lifeblood of a community. What are you going to be when you grow up? What's going to go where? What are you going to say yes to? What are you going to say no to? The ability to interact with those federal land managers is key. That's like the Planning Commission and the County Commission working together. And so we've got examples, I mean, in Carlin, in Fernley, in Story County, Virginia City, Elko, the checkerboard across the Union Pacific right away. I mean, a big part of everything we do revolves around what's going on with the real estate in your community.
So the more effective land management is, the better the economy overall.
Yep. I believe it. You talk about what you're going to be when you grow up. I mean, even in Las Vegas, how are you going to develop? What markets are you going to do? You're going to do warehousing. You're going to do casino resort. You're going to do agriculture. All of that stuff is stuff that those folks at the local level are the ones that I believe are in the best position to know that. That's why you give jurisdiction to planning commissions and county commissions and city councils.
You know, as we're wrapping up today, what is it like when you're in a committee meeting itself? I mean, what percentage of issues that come up every time you guys meet are important to Nevada? 90%? What's the?
You know what? It depends. There are some days where it's 110%. There are some days when it's an opportunity to help your colleagues with coastal areas, because you have a lot of federal management over coastal areas in terms of energy exploration, fisheries, things like that. So it's always important in terms of if you can be responsive to somebody, for instance, with a coastline, so that when you talk to them about a mountain range, that it's like, listen, I was there for you, I educated myself on your stuff, and I need your help on this stuff. So it's good.
Excellent. And when we return, we'll be right back with our mailbag segment. That's right after this.
All
All of us at Caesars Entertainment have something we want to say.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We don't want you to gamble if you've had too much to drink.
You shouldn't gamble if you're lonely or depressed.
And if you're under 21, you're not allowed to play.
No.
No matter which of our casinos you come to, our message is always the same.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We know you're coming to our casinos to have a good time, and we always want you to leave feeling like you did.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
My dad's one of the producers who's there today. Bring this one.
Built on a fleet of just 5 cabs bought in 1966 by founder Charlie Frias, Frias Transportation is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Today, Frias has a fleet of nearly 1,000 vehicles and more than 2,000 employees. As an industry and community leader, Frias continues to create the future of transportation technology and management and actively supports the community, continuing the legacy of quality service in the Las Vegas Valley. Simply the best. Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
We're back with our closing segment of Eye on Washington. It is our mailbag segment. In this segment, we tell you about an issue that the congressional mailbag page of the Joyce Communications website has been getting a lot of correspondence about. We read one of your letters on the air, and then we invite our guests to respond to you right here. And Congressman, your office has been hearing a lot lately about efforts to stop domestic violence. And I have a letter here to you from Jenna of Reno, and she says, Dear Congressman Amodei, under the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization of 2012, what types of state programs is Nevada eligible for grant funding to support?
Well, actually, I believe the Act contains language which continues all of the existing ones. The difference between the House and the Senate one started out, we were about 95% of what the Senate has passed. I think we ended up getting closer to 95%. But the idea was to take the programs that were in existence that had some success and continue those programs at funding levels that made some sense. So there were some reforms in it, but I don't think there were any programs that were in existence that were eliminated.
So Jenna can feel good that this passes. It'll be just as strong. All right. That is it for this week's Eye on Washington. Join us next time as we discuss more important federal matters and their impact on you in Nevada. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and read our Nevada's Washington Watch newsletter for the very latest news from Capitol Hill that matters most to you. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Marilee, Joyce in Washington. Good day.